to make sure you always walk in with your head held up high, walk with your shoulders back, like be proud of, the person you are and the person that your parents brought you up to be.
Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Welcome back to Up My Hockey for episode number 23. And today we have on Peter Worrell. Peter Worrell is an ex-teammate of mine back in the Florida Panther days. And Big Pete, as we called him, was big. Is still big. He's 6'7". His hockey card said 250. Maybe we won't ask what he weighs now. But Pete was a big man in the days of the big enforcers. And he's also a Caribbean Canadian. So he moved from the Barbados at 3 years old to Montreal, Quebec, where he found a love of the game of hockey and started to play and worked his way through the ranks and ended up for the Hall Olympique, where he won a Memorial Cup championship. Ended up getting drafted by the Florida Panthers in the 7th round, his rookie year in the league, and then made his way from the AHL into the NHL, where he was a longtime enforcer. Not many people can say that they led the CHL in penalty minutes as well as the NHL in penalty minutes. So Pete found his way in the sin bin a few times. He played hard. He played mean. He was very well respected and a very big man that was very hard to hit. And we talk about all that stuff. And we also talk about what it's like to be a black man in a white person's sport. And with all the discussion these days around the context of race and race relations and systemic racism, we cover that in the sport of hockey. And Pete is very eloquent, he's very intelligent, and he gets into his experience as a youth growing up and some of the stories that impacted him in the NHL. And he tells an amazing story about him and Craig Berube in his second game ever in the NHL, which is quite emotional. And it was a good conversation. It's conversations that we need to have, that I am trying to have more, where we can talk about what it's like to play our game and to operate in this world on an even playing field, on an even level, and trying to equalize the experience for everyone and make this great sport that we love accessible and as diverse as we can. Pete is now the director of hockey operations for the Junior Panthers in Florida. We actually didn't have time to get into all that in today's episode. I really wanted to chat with him about that, but as these things usually go, time flies when you're telling hockey stories. So I was really impressed with Pete during this interview. I was so pumped to be able to talk with him and catch up after such a long hiatus, as we hung out quite a bit when we were in the Panther organization together. So I hope there's lots of good takeaways from this, especially on the race part, on the part of the inclusivity of being a hockey player and what it means to be a part of the hockey community and what we are no longer willing to accept as a hockey community and what standards we have to set going forward and how it's not good enough to be quiet and to be silent anymore. So without further ado, I bring you one of the most penalized men of his era, Mr. Peter Worrell. All right, here we are, episode 23 of Up My Hockey, and I have an old teammate sitting in front of me by the name of Peter Worrell. Thank you so much for being here, Pete.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I hear it's number 23. It makes me feel good. I'm the Michael Jordan of this thing, so I feel pretty good already.
That's sweet. Yeah, and you're following on the heels of Kevin Weeks, which was a really awesome conversation that we had together, and a fellow Florida Panther alum as well.
I was gonna say it's not the first time following Kevin, so it's kind of been my career.
Oh, that's wild. And I don't even know where to start, really. I mean, other than the fact of so awesome to see you, it really
You
is,
too.
and so thankful for you doing this. You mentioned that a few places had reached out and were asking, and you haven't. But I guess I just asked at the right time, and I really appreciate you setting into this. What this whole thing is about, Pete. I know we didn't get a chance to talk too much offline. It's called Up My Hockey for a reason, is because I like talking about the person behind the athlete, the person, the little kid that's growing up and trying to have big dreams and doing things, and the stuff that they have to go through to make that happen. Even what happens in the NHL level, what the day-to-day kind of, right? The perseverance required, the adversity that they face. And because everyone has a different path and everyone has a different story, and it's really fun to open up that box. And I find it really interesting with guys that I used to play with, because like we did talk about a little bit earlier, we don't often have those conversations when we're in the locker room, right?
No, not very much. We talk about the day-to-day and, just stupid stuff. I mean, it's a locker room. Like it's usually, we're a bunch of young guys that, it's not very in-depth talks, put it that way. It's very surface talking. And even guys like you hang out with all the time, guys who are you consider your best friends. It wasn't really, what was your motivation for this or that? It was, why'd you make that play last night? What movie are you going to go watch tonight?
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's actually an interesting conversation in of itself, because I sit and watch baseball. I'm a bit of a baseball fan, and it seems like those guys, or some of those guys, are constantly like, where do you hold your fingers on the curveball? And like, what's your approach going up here? And it seems like that's more of a, I don't know what the right word is, but it's collaborative, right? It's collaborative. It seems like that approach. And I just felt like with us, maybe the dynamics of the game, but like we were obviously good buddies and we always did a lot together, but it wasn't about, hey man, like what's your stress points? Or, how you dealing with the getting sent down or called up? Maybe that was never a discussion, and I don't know why.
Yeah. I think it was just a different society back then as well. Right. Like, the mental health aspect of it was frowned upon, I guess, in certain ways. It's one of the things that I guess I'm a little bit jealous of today's guys, is that they can be themselves. They can be vulnerable when they need to be. They can show strength at different times. They can show their personality a lot more than it was even 25 years ago. I think one of the things in the game of hockey, which is it's been good, is that we're a bunch of good old boys. We get along. We treat each other with respect. But it's very homogenized, right? Or at least it was back then, where, if you, I don't want to say get out of line, but if you didn't just toe the company line in every aspect, if you didn't give the most boring interview that you possibly could, that basically revealed nothing, you were seen upon as being, a rebel, not being part of the group, and in some ways can get ostracized in that. And I've always felt that was always a mistake. I always felt that, in terms of marketing our league and marketing our players, there's guys with some great personalities, again, you just said you had Weeksy here last week. He's one of the most interesting dudes forever. Like when we met him at 18, 19 years old, he was fully fleshed out as Weeksy, right? And even he was never able to really, show that type of personality, to the larger world. Like he, even in pockets with different guys that he felt really comfortable with. Yeah. But it was just different. Right. And when you have those conversations with guys, it was superficial, not in the sense of we didn't care for each other, because I think we did. Yeah. But it just wasn't how we were taught and how we were brought up at that time. And like I think that the kids who are coming up today are a lot healthier because of it. It's okay to be down. It's okay to cry. I mean, it's not a shot at your masculinity or your humanity. It's life. Life can be great. Life can suck. Life can be terrible. And I think the more that you're able to express it and talk it out, I think it allows you to deal with stuff a lot better.
100%. Wow. I didn't think we were going to go there that quick, but I mean, that's really poignant. I mean, I think, and it makes me reflect too on like what it meant to be a hockey player One,
Mhm.
right? The idea of what it meant to be a hockey player, right? This
Mhm.
kind of gladiator type thing. And in Canada, I mean, football isn't really a big deal. And like the sport of men
Yeah,
is hockey, right?
100%.
And you had this idea of what type of persona fit into that role. And then you also compound the idea of like what it means to be Canadian, growing up a
Yeah,
Canadian male, right?
yeah.
You know, I mean, like what that means. And, you know, a good old boy and tough hombre and doesn't mind the odd beer. And, you know, you
We
throw
had to
that.
live up to Don Cherry's, definition of what a hockey player was,
Yeah.
and for some guys, that's exactly who they were. I'd say for a lot of us, it wasn't,
Yeah.
but you tried to play into that, I guess, stereotype or whatever word you
Yeah.
want to use for it. And I think it again, I think it limits guys, and I think overall it limits, the marketability that for some players in different avenues, right? I think
Mhm.
when people, especially in the States, when they think of hockey players, again, they think we're boring.
Yeah.
And there's nothing further than the truth as us being boring. I mean, especially back then, we liked to have fun. Like
Yeah.
we let loose a lot, but you know, uh, our personas were pretty standard. That yes ma'am, no ma'am. Everybody worked really hard today. We gave our best effort, and
Right.
best team won. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many times I said that during my
Right.
career.
No, 100%. I mean, as you say that, I'm thinking of so many things, like in how I watch the game and the guys come to the rink now, and something as simple as, someone wearing a blue suit with suit with pink shoes or something, something
Yeah.
and their hair all spiked up. I mean, can you imagine if we would have done that back
Oh
in
no.
96? I mean,
Oh
it just
no.
wouldn't have. We all had the same color suit on. It was navy blue or black.
Yeah.
And we all had the same tie and we all looked the same and we walked the same and we
Pretty
were the
much.
same,
Yeah, pretty much.
but then
Except
in
for Weeksy.
saying that, like, I
Except for
don't know if
Weeksy.
this is the appropriate time to bring it up, but like in saying that, and then when we're in this context of race now, and I had this discussion with Weeksy last week, it's like, I was colorblind to that because we were so colorblind. Like everyone, like you said, it was homogenized. Everyone
Yeah.
to me seemed the same. We were hockey players. We were the boys. So like whether I was talking to Weeksy or Pete Worrell or David Nemirovsky, Canadian Russian, right? It was like, hey man, like we're just all doing the same thing. And I never ever once thought to think, hey, is this different for Pete or is this different for Weeksy? Do you think that was even different for you guys, like being in that homogenous place, but yet not being a white guy with the rest of the crew?
Yeah, I mean, in certain aspects, absolutely. But I don't. I look at my career and the people that I was around and surrounded with, in a lot of ways, as a blessing. I was really fortunate. I had good teammates, I had good organizational people from day one, from the jump. And if you don't know anything, you don't know to think anything differently. And I did want to just be considered a hockey player, not a black hockey player, just anything. I was a hockey player. I was one of the guys. And that's how I wanted to be treated. But certainly, like, there was moments where you just couldn't be yourself, right? Like, I was out at our rink. There was, NHL practice going on a couple of weeks ago, or guys, skating, whatever. While they're on the ice, they had the music blaring, and it was all, modern hip hop. The thought of putting Tupac or Biggie on when I was, in a practice would have been asinine. Like it wouldn't even be a thought process that I could even do it. Like, especially, not as much in the minors, because I think we were all younger and a lot of us listen to similar stuff. But, when you step into that NHL rink or dressing room where, you were 30, 40-year-old guys, there was no way that we were playing our own music, right? Like, I think Weeksy would say the same thing. We had our big headphones, we stuck in our corner, and we listened to what we wanted to listen to. And we knew when we took our headphones on, it was going to be, some country or some heavy metal. And, not that it's not great music, it just wasn't what we listened to, right?
Yeah.
Some of the things that some of the groups that we hung out with and how we hung out back in Montreal or Toronto, it's the way that we carried ourselves there was a lot different than what we carried ourselves in the dressing room. I think, I think a lot of Black people, especially who are in professional setting, you learn early on to do a little bit of code switching, right? So You know, how I talked to, you know, Weeksy the first time I met him, you know, was different than I would have spoke to you the first time. And it's nothing, you know, it's not, it wasn't a situation that I didn't care about everybody else. It was just, we had different experiences. We all knew that, but it was just, you know, it's just kind of the way it was. Right. You know, the slang that you use, the way that you walk or talk, it was just a little bit different in whichever setting you work in. Right. So, in that aspect, it was, I think that's what was different. But again, I don't look back at that as a bad time or a suffocating type situation. It's just the way it was. You know, that's where we were in society. You know, it's much different now. But again, like I look at, you know, walking into that building the very first day, or getting picked up at the airport by Scott Tinkler the very first day, and you know, having, you know, the battles between Florida State and Miami, you know, and you know, just the way that everybody embraced me, like from day one, even when I wasn't ready to be a pro player that first year. You know, everybody embraced me, like from Mr. Torrey all the way down. You know, race, you know, was there, but it was never made to feel different. It was never meant to feel like, you know, an other. Yeah. You know, I remember one of the very first conversations I had with Mr. Torrey was, you know, and with Brian Murray, were, you know, to make sure you always walk in with your head held up high, you know, walk with your shoulders back, like be proud of, you know, the person you are and the person that your parents brought you up to be. And, you know, my time with this Florida Panthers organization as a player, you know, when I got to Colorado was a lot the same way, was really positive. Is that the case for every player? Absolutely not. You know, right. And you know, I knew those stories. I talked to, you know, the guys in the league who were having, you know, a lot different experiences than I was. So, I mean, again, I'm very grateful for the time I had. I was, you know, I grew up hoping to play one NHL game, let alone as many as I did. And to be around the people that I got to meet, you know, from yourself to David Lemanowicz to, you know, Stu Barnes and Chris Wells and you know, Pavel Bure was phenomenal. And I, you know, again, I'm very blessed in that way.
That's super cool. Yeah, I mean, and Florida was, I mean, I hate to use the word progressive because we're talking 95, and when it comes to race relations, I mean, that shouldn't be considered progressive. But, you know, for them to draft Weeksy, for them to draft you, you know, that is something to say about that organization, because there's obviously a lot of guys in the draft, you know, so like they didn't see color, right? And
absolutely not.
And if they did, maybe they even saw it in a positive kind of an affirmative action way. Like they were playing out of Miami, you know, I mean, in an area that was, you know, that there, I mean, maybe they were trying to do something population. Too. Yeah, exactly. You know, and that might not have been a crazy idea at the time either. So I don't know if that's good or bad or indifferent. But I mean, the fact was that you and Weeksy were there at the time where a lot of teams didn't have anyone in the organization anywhere that were of color, right?
No, look, I mean, I know that first year that we actually got called up and we're playing together. You know, we were still out of the Miami arena, and you know, I don't know if Weeksy ever told you the story. Like we used to. You know, we used to see, you know, young black kids and you know, it was in a bad neighborhood back then. And you know, in our suits, we'd walk kids home and make sure they were safe. And before we got in our car and drove back all the way back to Boca, like it was having both of us there was good in that aspect. But honestly, like it was a colorblind thing, in all honesty, because I mean, you know, Brian Murray, who was the GM that drafted me, and actually his nephew, Timmy, who ended up being the GM in Buffalo for a while, was the guy that pounded the table for me. You know, I remember Brian Murray telling me that, like, one of the reasons he really loved me was that I was him. You know, I played the game like him. I thought the game like him. I carried myself amongst the teammates like he did. You know, so, you know, to me, I always took that as, you know, you're just a guy, like you're part of us, right? Like it was yes, you're a black man, but you are, a hockey player first and a teammate first. And that's all that matters to us, and that was, as a young guy, especially back then, that was really motivating.
Yeah.
It was really something that made me feel really good, that I really wanted to, be a good player for this organization and hopefully, light the way for guys to follow.
Right. I love that story about, Bill Torrey's telling you that. And, that's the thing I think that was missing back in that day was the human aspect and the human approach to the players, like that conversation probably just meant the absolute world to you. I wish I would have had a conversation similar to that with Mr. Torrey, just to know, right, that this guy gets me and he wants the best for me, right? And he wants me to be proud of where I am and enjoy it. And that's really cool message. But let's get back. I mean, here we are, we're talking about pro, and I really want to understand like your heritage and stuff. I know you're Caribbean Canadian, but where were you born? Were you born in Canada?
Barbados.
You were born in Barbados.
Yes.
Gotcha. So how old were you when you ended up moving?
3 years old. Yeah.
And what brought your parents to Canada?
They'd been in Canada before. They'd lived in Hamilton when they were young. They moved back to Barbados, and then they got transferred back in Montreal with me and my brother. And the first time that my parents were here or in Canada, my dad fell in love with hockey. He fell in love with the Canadians, so the fact that he got transferred back into Montreal was kind of providence for him. And when as young kids, we didn't know anything better. My dad just put us on the ice. Obviously my brother is 7 years older than me, so like he understood it a little bit more, and it was just a cool thing for him to do, a good way to meet friends and meet people in the community, where for me it was more of I just wanted to be like my big brother. So I went to the rink, followed him, and not only was my brother there, my cousin was there, and my cousin in our area growing up was a really good player. He was a player that most of the kids in our neighborhood wanted to be. He had offers to play at Michigan State when back when that was even a thought of thing in Quebec. He was a really, really talented player that my generation of guys, myself, PJ Stock, Vinny LeCave, Jason Doig, we all, that was one of the guys that we kind of looked up to. So, I got to go to the rink every day, trying to be those guys, trying to catch up with those guys, getting a whole lot of friends when I started playing. And, it was a really good experience. I mean, there was obviously, it was never always smooth sailing. I mean, Montreal back then was, could be in different parts of the province, or it could be really tough. It was very homogenized in a lot of those areas, and there weren't a lot of black faces, so people felt very comfortable to try to tear down a 9-year-old. But the same token, it was just never something that I allowed to get in my way. I was fortunate enough, from the age of 5 to be on a team with Jason Doig, who was, another black man who, he ended up playing, for New York and Washington and Phoenix.
Good player. Yeah.
He was a really good player. Won a gold medal with the World Juniors. So we were kind of always on the same team forever. So we always had somebody that we could rely on and kind of confide to and try to get through it with. So, whenever somebody said something that was untowards, usually back then it was more to Doiger, to be honest with you, because he was a really good player back then when we were really young. As we got older and the game, went from, just youth hockey to be more physical. It went a little bit more back to me. I mean, right. The way that I played, I was confrontational. So I mean, it didn't help the situation, but it was never anything that I felt that I couldn't deal with. Right. Like at the end of the day, I love this game more than anything, there was nothing that was there was nobody that was gonna stop me from, just playing to where my level. Like, I didn't know where that was. I never assumed it was gonna be an NHL, but I wanted to, make the next team and the next team, the next team. And, stupidity was not going to be something that was going to get in my way.
Right. No, exactly. And it is stupid, but I hear in like in Twittersville and in different spots, it seems like there's maybe a misunderstanding amongst some white people about like what is racism and what is a jab.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and obviously, and I don't think I'm definitely not an expert, and I think it's just, why do you say anything? But I just, for those people out there that think that, well, I'm not a racist, I'm just whatever, this is just a sport, and I can, I'm saying this in whatever jest or whatever the thing is. Like, what do you have to say about those like those people or that thought?
I think it's comforting to them, in certain ways. I mean, it makes them feel, I don't want to say righteous, but makes them feel comfortable with some of the actions.
Right.
Again, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfect, or I haven't said things that were absolutely stupid. God knows I have. But I think there's just certain rails that you don't touch, right? And for me, it's I would never say anything about somebody's family. I would never say anything about people's personal problems or struggles. And obviously, I think race was at least especially for me, was something that was a line for me that I just didn't really want to cross. Right. Again, like, at the end of the day, we're all human, and all of us just want to kind of have respect and respect of everybody around us. A jab of saying, you can't play hockey, great. Awesome. Like, say that all day. Like, you're probably right in some cases. If you said I think the one of the best ones I heard was, you couldn't carry the puck up the ice in a wheelbarrow. I was like, awesome. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that for years. Things like that. Those are jabs, right? Like, you're going after an ability. When you're going after somebody over things that they have no control over. I mean, I have no control of being black. I mean,
right.
It's who I am,
right. Or where you're from, or where you were born, or exactly. in any of those things.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, again, do I say that those people were racist? No. I think people have biases, and I think people have some bigoted views. To me, racism is the denial of opportunities for people. That's true racism, not allowing people to go to a certain school, not allowing people to have certain jobs or have relationships. That's true racism. But there's a lot of, systematic stuff that still needs to be dealt with. And, I think in this time, in this moment, it's an opportunity to address some of those things. Right. But I do think a lot of those, jabs were just, were people having bigoted opinions and not understanding the ramifications of when you say stuff like that, not only to the person you're saying it to, but for yourself. Because it allows you to, or allows anybody else to say, no, dude, you're racist. Like, right. You want me to tell you, you're making racial connotation, racial jokes. As a French Canadian, even though, I'm English, but as a French Canadian, I mean, there's a lot of jokes that are made against French people, right? And stereotypes that are continuously said about, French Canadians that I participated in at times. I'm an idiot sometimes. But as you get older and once you start understanding stuff, like, what's the point? Like, these guys, everybody works hard. Everybody's trying to get stuff. Everybody's trying to be a good father, a good son, a good husband. Those are the only things that really matter in life. And, right. I think when you try to demean somebody based off, those criteria, it casts you in a light that it's hard for you to try to defend yourself to say that you aren't. Like, are you a bad person overall? Not always. Sometimes, some really nice people say some really horrendous things. But again, you put yourself in a category where you can look like that person who is, fully bigoted, hateful, wants nothing but just their people to succeed and everybody else to be eradicated. Like it's unfortunate. And again, I hope in a lot of cases that people are given an opportunity to try to, learn from it and try to, make themselves better from it. And I think a lot of people do, but a lot of people don't, and once they kind of show you their face and it's kind of who they are as a person, you just, move along. Like we have no business hanging out with each other.
Well, I think for me now listening to that, and you even talking about, somebody feeling comfortable enough to tear down a 9-year-old, like that's the type of stuff, one where I was from, it didn't exist because I was in Whitesville. There was nobody of color on the ice, right? So I didn't really hear that. I wasn't exposed to it personally. I never partook in it. But you did, and in those scenarios, what do you think should happen? Like what I see as a brighter future is, like, if something gets said like that, and we've used that word jab in air quotes, right? That it's not a jab, it's something that shouldn't be said. But like if something does get said like that, like that there should be like a screech on the record and like everything stops and it's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Because it seemed like it was almost too easy to say at a certain point, right? Like if you're back at 9 years old now, and you're with, you're with youth hockey now, like how does that, how does your experience apply and tattoo into what you're trying to develop there in Florida now with making this game celebrate the diversity within it, right? And make it a safe place and a fun place for people to be. Like, how do you handle the people that shouldn't be there in the first place?
Again, if it's, I think you kind of try to differentiate between parents and kids, right? With the kids, again, depending on, their age and their experiences, you hope that if they do something or say something wrong, you can pull them aside, you can teach them, give them a teachable moment that they can learn from and be better from. That's the whole purpose of being a coach. We're trying to be teachers of life, not just, on ice. With parents, it's obviously a lot different. For me, if that happens in my building, that person's gone. It's just as simple as that.
Right.
And I think what needs to be done, and I think hopefully it's what's going to happen going forward, is that people around that person don't allow that to be okay. Whether it's your teammates, fellow parent on a team, don't condone it. Don't even be just, walk away from it and just push it aside. Like we have to check ourselves, right? And you hope that, they speak up, they let the person know that that's not right. They work with the people in the facilities and arenas to get that person out. Hopefully that person has to, have their public shame. I think that's one of the things that hasn't happened, is that the person that does it doesn't get publicly shamed. So, to them it's like, okay, who cares? Like, no big deal. I hope those are the steps that will be taken. I know that in our facility, it would not be the smartest thing to do. It's not going to be something that I'm going to put up with, and I know as an organization that's not something that from top to bottom that we will put up with. But you hope, across the nation, across North America, people take stronger steps, right? I know the story that happened, I guess, last season in the Quebec Senior League, where, fans were chanting monkey noises and going after a player, and I guess they kicked that person out, but like, that person should be banned. That person should be, that person's name should have been out there. like let them, everybody know who this person is.
Right.
I think that would discourage, people to do it in the future. Will it stop it? Probably not. I mean, that's, we got to be realistic and stuff. But if it puts a second thought in somebody's head that, maybe I should keep my mouth shut or find a better way to, go after a person. That's kind of the goal. Again,
Yeah.
I love, fans being loud and boisterous. Like, again, I was the bad guy. Like it gave me energy. Like I love being, booed, on the road. It was great.
Yeah.
But again, it's how it's done and what's said. And when you get to personal stuff like that, that's just, it never really had an effect. And I know, speaking to guys on other teams, when your fan base does it, like you almost feel, extra weird, extra terrible. I remember again playing in Quebec League and getting chanted down by the the whole stands, and the captain of the other team was a black guy who was just sitting there like, I don't know what to tell you, Pete. Like I want to. If you want to jump in the stands, I'm going to be there with you. It sucks. It just sucks.
Well, that's what we was talking about, the hypocrisy of that sometimes in cities, right?
Absolutely.
He used Philly as an example, right? Like cheer for Allen Iverson, but
yeah, he's our black.
Yeah. He's our black. Like it makes a difference. But I mean, as the white guy in this conversation, like, and Jonathan Taves has spoken up, and now and Sidney Crosby and a lot of these guys, and we talk about the acceptance factor, and I think when it gets with the collective gets to be in agreement and is not silent, then I do think that it stops allowing these things to happen. Like whether it's on your own team or on the other team, right? That this is just not okay. And like I said, and everyone stops and looks at the guy and is like, no, this doesn't happen here anymore, right? Yeah. And I think that's definitely a good place to start, instead of it being just the two people involved. It can't be just the two people involved. It's got to be more than that. No, absolutely. And I think that's one of the benefits of having conversations like this, Pete, is like it's becoming, that acceptance and that awareness and that expectation level for everyone involved in the sport to be like, okay, this is the standard now. Yeah. This is our new standard, right? We've talked about it. We get it. We're humans. This is the way it goes now. And I do see hopefully like a silver lining in the cloud, right? And I guess that's what we're all hoping for, I guess, right?
No, I honestly, I do really agree with you there. The fact that white players are standing up and being allies in this thing. To me, again, it's this younger generation kind of gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. They don't care as much as older groups, or they're lackadaisical or whatever. These young people today are world changers. I sit here in Parkland, Florida. We're right down the street from Stoneman Douglas, and seeing the energy of those young people to try to enact change was awe-inspiring. Seeing the people, the people who are doing it the right way, but the people who are out there marching and fighting for justice, racial justice. Again, it's awe-inspiring and it's exciting to see. And the young guys in the league, or even, I guess they're older guys now, but I forget how old I am now. But these young guys, they've changed what's accepted. They've changed what's not accepted. They've changed the atmosphere around the rink, right? And not only on like racial stuff, but just with they're getting better with with the LGBT community. I mean, I'm not, I would be a hypocrite to sit here and say that like during our time, it wasn't easy just to say a stupid thing against gay people, right? Like it was just, we didn't think better, and that's not acceptable anymore, and it shouldn't be, and it never should have been. To me, I mean, it's what a person does with their life is what they do with their life. It's never been something that bothers me, but it was so easy just to throw stuff out like that. Yeah. And again, with society, with how athletes act today or talk today, those things aren't acceptable. And to me, those are steps in the right direction. Those are, trying to achieve the society that we always say we are, right? Like, we're actually putting forth the steps, so younger people at least are putting forth the steps to actually be a fully equal place, a community, a society that values everybody equally, has opportunities for everyone. To me, again, that's so awe-inspiring. Just the advocacy, just in general.
Yeah.
I think, our generation in some ways, made a mistake, and not just, hockey players or anything, but just in general. I think in our time as athletes, I think too many of us lived up to the Michael Jordan statement. Everybody, even Republicans buy shoes. So like a lot of people just stopped trying to have any views. Everything was just straight up the line. I don't want to defend one side or the other, and I get that. And obviously that's the life that most of us live.
Mm-hmm.
But I was inspired growing up by Muhammad Ali. I was inspired by athletes, Juan Carlos and the guys of the Olympics. I was inspired by all kinds of people of that nature, and we got away from it. And to see athletes in all sports, whether it's Patrick Mahomes and LeBron James, starting a voting registration type thing, whether it's the diversity group that they put together with the NHL with Alou and Kane and all those guys, Nazi Kadri, who I believe is in that as well. That's, to me, is incredible, and I think it's helping us as a league, as a society, as a sports world get better.
So just want to take a short break from the conversation with Peter to thank you guys for, one, being here and listening, and two, for doing your part in growing the podcast. And I've asked in previous weeks to please get out there amongst your friends, amongst social media, to share the content and to review the episode and to rate it. And it's growing. The episode has been moving up the ranks. I believe we're top 50 podcasts now for hockey in Canada, which I'm really proud of. And this is just the beginning. So thank you for doing that. I am going to read one of the reviews. This is on iTunes from Cooner. It says, "Love the podcast. As a parent of bantam and midget-aged hockey players who are both looking to secure college scholarships, the information in the podcast is so valuable. I love how the hockey stories get mixed in with the information sharing. I find this to be a must-listen for players and parents looking to secure a hockey future for their kids. Great job, and keep up the good work." That's amazing. I love reading stuff like that. I love being able to share that. And please do continue to review, and I will try and read a review on the air and recognize you for supporting me and supporting our guests and supporting the show. So thanks again. Keep up the good work. And now back to the episode. Yeah, no, agreed. As far as the league goes, and they are obviously trying to make change, and that's bad stuff. Sometimes pushes things to the forefront, and just when I was looking back and researching you on this episode, there was some scenarios in your time. One that was actually documented with, a guy who, Craig Berube, who just won the Stanley Cup and has kind of turned into a folk hero as a coach. And I don't know personally, but a lot of people have a lot of good things to say with him. But he had a 1-game suspension for calling you a monkey, is how I read it. Yeah. Is that, like, if that was to happen today, I think there'd be a different suspension there. Yeah. Do you think, like, how the league handled it at the time, like, how did that make you feel as a person at the time? Was that enough in that year, or was it not? Like, how do you remember that playing out?
No, I mean, look, I think we're in a different point of time, right? So the fact that there was anything done, I think at that point was a step in the right direction. So I mean, I was, from the league point of view, especially I think that was my second game in the league. For Craig, that he's a longtime NHL player, well respected, and rightfully so. And for the league to make that decision to back a guy, again, who's in his second game, who could be his last game, again, was signed to me of positivity and support for myself. But whenever that story comes, I always want to make the point, and I think sometimes it gets lost. Craig immediately understood what he did, and immediately seeked me out after that game. He went to Scott Mellenby, who was old teammates with him, absolutely apologetic, like almost in tears to apologize for me, because he understood he took away some of my dignity. And as somebody of color, I think he really understood that. And after the game, we lost the game. I think guys that played with me know that I absolutely hated losing, and I was not a very good person to be around when we lost. So, I was doing my workout. I was really mad, and I just didn't really want to hear it at that moment. But I woke up the next morning. The first thing I got was a phone call from Craig. Absolutely apologetic, like from his heart. And the things that he said to me, I won't, discuss it, but it was obvious that he understood, and that he would vow to not make that mistake again. And to me, I have the most respect for him in the world. Like it was not something he had to do. It's something that he should have done, yes, but he didn't have to do. And the fact that nobody twisted his arm, nobody forced him to do it, nobody hey, you screwed up, you better go fix that. He as a man, as a human being, realized that, this is a 19-year-old kid. Like, what am I doing? Really meant the world to me. And to see the success that he's had going forward, it's not surprising to me, because I think a person that can be like that is a person that can lead men, and that's certainly what he's shown. Obviously, I think he had the one head coaching job where things didn't go perfectly, but again, he was somebody that was willing to learn from that mistake and be better and he's made himself arguably one of the top coaches in the league. And I tip my hat to him for that accomplishment, and I tip my hat to him, in the time machine, the fact that he did what he did. And I always want to make sure that part of the story is told as much. I think too much of the story is only about the action, the original action, but not of the reaction. And I think that's as telling about his character as anything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so super happy I brought it up, and so thankful that you shared that, because Nicole's notes of what gets written, that doesn't get written, right? That's in the footnotes of history, and what was said between you and him is between you and him. But I couldn't agree more. You saying, that's a sign of leadership. You've said dumb stuff. I've said dumb stuff. I've done stupid stuff, right? What do you do after you do that, right? Are you too proud to say anything? Do you actually feel remorse? You're saying all those things that he instantly knew, and he made amends the best way he knew how, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And probably judging by where he's ended up, he's probably never said it since or anything like that.
I would assume so. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah, it might have been a massive learning point for him too, and that's progress. So, even in being able to tell that story, that something could be, clouded, that is actually kind of something really human and beautiful in its own way, that, that you end up having this great respect for him and probably for each other, and over something that was kind of gross and ugly at the start. But so it goes. That's life. That's being human, right?
I honestly, again, I always think it's a mistake, because I think it makes the story so much better when you get the full scope of it. Yeah. And not to try to make one of us a villain. Like he wasn't a villain. He made a mistake. He said something stupid. He said something that he said to players that he's fought for years and not having that same connotation to a white player.
Yeah.
It was just it's what I do. It's what I say. And as soon as I realized I said it to you, I felt like an idiot. And I could understand that. Again, I could understand what he was, his feelings at that time, right? I can understand again, saying something really stupid in the moment.
Yeah.
And
he's lived that. His American, like you said, his American Indian background, right? Like, he's
absolutely,
he's felt his own scenario, and I'm sure that touched home for him. So, no, like that's, yeah, good on both of you. And I'm sure there's other stories that you could tell along the way. And I don't want to spend our whole episode here on that. I know it's probably going to weave through some of the questions, but I want to celebrate you as the hockey player, because, that the time in Hull was really epic, man. Like,
yeah,
checking it out, and to see that you guys won those 2 championships, within the queue, and then went on to win a Memorial Cup in '97.
Yeah.
And your stat line just blows my mind. Like the 23 goal. Let's actually start at that rookie year. Because here comes Pete, comes into the queue, and like how did that even start? And then we'll get into kind of how that year rolled out for you.
Well, I think you got to go back a little bit, right? So growing up in Montreal, I played on some really good teams as a kid, and I was always kind of like the leading scorer on most of my teams. I had a natural goal scoring ability. My skating was awful, but I was also bigger than everybody. So I wish I was better at it, or when I was a kid, to understand that, hey man, I gotta work on my feet. I gotta be quicker. I waited too long in some aspects of that. So by the time I got to the junior or my first junior tryout, even though I was drafted by Hull, I had no expectations to make that team. I was thinking, if I can stay there for 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be put on their list and maybe they buy me some skates. Like that was literally the only thought process I had. So when I made the team, I was super pumped. But I did not know what I was. I didn't have a role. I had no clue. I was just a body. My first fight in junior, I think I scored 2 goals that game. And both times I was talking junk to the defender in front of me. Like, you can't cover me. You can't handle me, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize he was the toughest guy in the league at that time. I had no clue. And when he fought me, he grabbed me at the end of a shift, like in the third period, and was like, let's go. And I was like, all right, let's do this, real nonchalant. And, went to grab his right, and he was just a lefty and just kept feeding me. And I think, like, I honestly think he knocked me out and then woke me back up, like, in successive punches. Like, it was an absolute beating. So even that part, like at early in my career, like I had no idea what I was, right? But again, I was around some really great people, like Charlie Henry, who was the GM of that organization. Was much in the vein of Mr. Torrey and Mr. Murray. Really believed in me and really felt that I could do something. And coaching staff was great. Claude Julien was my assistant coach at that time, and he took me and a couple other younger guys under his wing and just kept trying to work on us on all aspects of the game. But my stat line at that end of that year was, I think, a goal and 7 assists or something like that. And I had a teammate on that team who is Jose Theodore, who obviously was a great NHL goalie. He'll tell everybody till he's blue in the face that he outscored me that year. So like it kept me in my place. We'll just say that. But I got drafted that year by Florida, which was surprising. Again, my stat line that year was what it was. It wasn't anything special. Obviously, winning the Quebec League was phenomenal, especially the fact that year, I think we had 13 or 14 rookies. We had no business winning it that year. And that was the nucleus of the team that won it a couple years later. But, I got drafted. I didn't understand what being a pro was. So I went to camp the next year. I wasn't ready. Wasn't prepared. Got my butt chewed out by people in Florida. When I got back to Hull, got chewed out by them again. Got back to Florida, got chewed out by them again, and made sure that they sent me home as quickly as they possibly could. And it was humbling. And I, put it in my mind I was going to work my tail off. And I, spent that first month, I think I dropped like 25 pounds. It's just like doing 2-a-days and getting back in shape. And I was fortunate enough, somebody got hurt, and they tried me out on the first line with Marty Menard and Pavel Rosa, who just came over from the Czech Republic, and it clicked. Like we worked really well together, and I put up some really good numbers. They put up some stupid numbers. I mean, I think they were like 150 points, 160 points. I had 70 or something like that. So I mean, it was good, but I mean, it was certainly it was very helpful. And then, I came back the next year, went to the camp in Florida.
Well, hold on. I'm going to stop you. I got to stop you because you go from 9 points, right? And getting drafted, as you said, there's a couple juicy things there that I picked up, because one is you weren't expecting to make the junior team, right? So then you make the junior team. You're not even sure what's going on, which way's up, which way's down. You're fighting for the first time. You've never done this before.
Yeah.
You've been a goal scorer your entire career in minor hockey.
Yep.
And now you're playing in the queue, trying to figure that out. You get drafted, which is huge, but you've barely even figured out how to be a junior, and now you're going to pro camp, right? And it's like, holy smokes, right? That must have been like a whirlwind for you, those 12 months. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Again, like when we won that cup in the Quebec League that year, to me that was like the greatest thing ever. Like we're going to celebrate this. We're going to have fun. We're going to party. And we did that for probably a little too long. But I went home and I remember the draft was in Edmonton that year. My buddy Doiger was ready to go really high and be a first rounder. And I think I was ranked like in the 9th round without the Europeans, without the goalies. So I remember saying, like, I'm not going to fly into Edmonton. Like, I don't have that money. So me and PJ Stock and his brother and a couple other guys that we grew up with went to a Mexican restaurant that night, and we were waiting to see our buddy get drafted. It was a really good time. We enjoyed it. And then that was it. Like nobody was thinking about anything else. I went to bed that night, and I remember my dad woke me up like at 7 a.m. and had the newspaper in his hand. He was like, Pete, you got drafted. And I looked, I was like, cool, and rolled back over and went to sleep. And when I finally woke up a couple hours later, I was like, did that happen? Wait a second. I ran to my dad's room. I'm like, Dad, did you tell me I got drafted? He's like, yes. So like I was super pumped. And I guess Florida told me that they tried to call me, and somehow they had the wrong number. So they kept calling some old lady who was like, thought she was getting, pranked the whole time. And so they just gave up. And eventually they got a hold of Charlie Henry, who got them in touch with me. And that was that. But again, after that point, like I still did not, understand like what was going on. Like I didn't understand the commitment that was really necessary. So like I went to camp and I was 20 pounds heavier than I was the year before. Right. And like I said, they chewed me the hell out, and rightfully so. And I'm glad they did. And I went back to Hull because I went there for rookie camp first. But that's that. When we had it up in Deerfield, we were all at Embassy Suites over there. And, when you guys would go to the beach, I'd make sure I had my T-shirt on. I was like, I ain't going out there. Forget that. I'm going to sit in the hot tub. But I went back to Hull, and, my coach kicked the crap out of me. Like, hey, you're riding up 2-hour bike rides every day, after the skates. You're going to work out. You're eating salad and that's it. And I dropped 25, it got me set up and made me understand kind of what it really took. Right.
Sure.
So when I went back the next year, or when the end of that season ended, and I had a really good year, and got a lot of calls from Florida about like, we actually look at you as a prospect now. I was like, oh shit, where'd that come from? I understood to take it a little bit serious. So I bought one of those, the bikes that they had there, the
Cybex,
the old Cybex, the old big black
I bought one too.
Yeah. So I put that in my basement. And I think the first night I got back home, went out to dinner with a couple friends, and I would, again, it's kind of how my life was. I was really lucky. This guy came up to me. He was like, "Hey, I hear you're a junior hockey player." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. I'd love to be your trainer." So, great. Okay. Get back to my meal. We just kept, kept talking, telling me that he had just graduated from McGill in kinesiology. His thesis was on plyometrics and how they applied it to the performance of hockey players. And I was like, you know what? Let me give this guy a shot. And dude would show up at my house at like 5 a.m. every day to make sure I'm on that bike. We go to the gym for like 2-3 hours every day. And like the things that we were doing back then were, everybody kind of looked at us weird.
Right.
Like now that like I see people who are training kids right now, they're doing a lot of stuff that we were doing 25 years ago.
Right.
He's now the head trainer for the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was always a legit guy, and I was lucky just to meet him at a restaurant. And he put me on a path to, that when I went back to camp that second camp, I think I won the award for the best conditioning athlete in the camp. It was like, for the organization, they kind of looked at it as like, oh, geez, like you got the point.
This guy's all business. Yeah. No.
This guy understands it now. And, somehow, again, like I was a 7th round pick in the NHL at 19 years old, a 7th round fighter. And at 19 years old, I made the team coming out of camp. And, I broke my hand, I think the last day of like training camp. So that's why I got sent down to Hull that year.
Mm-hmm.
But like I went back to Hull and we had such a great team. We had such great guys. Claude Julien took over as a head coach, and it kind of changed even the atmosphere, that we were more relaxed. We were a veteran team at that point, and we just kind of ran through the league and got to Memorial Cup and ran through our first couple games, and then had one of the worst games experience of my life playing against Lethbridge. I think we were up 5-1 going with about 12 minutes left in the third, and somehow found a way to lose it, which was in our home building, which was not a good feeling. Unfortunately, we were able to, meet them again in the finals, and were able to, to prevail. And they had a really good team. They had some really good players on that team: Byron Ritchie and Shane Willis and Dale Purinton and Travis Brigley and Bryce Salvador was on that team. They were a solid squad. But yeah, we were very fortunate. It was an unbelievable experience. Thankful for it every day. But yeah, it was a wild ride for 3 years. My whole junior career was a wild ride.
Yeah, anytime you win anything of any type of magnitude, it keeps that group together forever, essentially, right? Like you remember who's on that team, and it's just such a bonding thing. But yeah, I just wanted to point out, because for everyone listening, to score 23 goals in that league and have a point a game while you're getting 460 penalty minutes and 490 penalty minutes, and even being a point a game guy in the playoffs 2 years in a row. That's super cool, and maybe something that gets overshadowed too and doesn't want to get talked about, because you did it again in New Haven, which is super cool. Like I looked on the stats there. You had the same amount of goals as Bates Battaglia did that year. Not many people would guess that in a trivia question,
I was a first-line guy on that team, for that year. I was playing with Nemo, Dave Demarowski. I was playing with Ryan Johnson on line. We really clicked. And my confidence was super high. Like I came off those 2 years in junior where, I felt like I was a player, and I walked into the pros and felt the same way, at least in the minors. Right. And I was given those opportunities to play in those roles, and I was able to succeed with them. But yeah, no, I mean, that year in New Haven was kind of an extension of my junior year.
Right.
And it was probably the last time until my last year in Charlotte where I got to be a full-rounded hockey player again. Right. So it was a good time.
Yeah, well, the NHL's tough, as you know, and I was actually going to say that. You mean by the time you left junior, were you the biggest man on campus there? Like, were you recognized as being one of the? There was some tough guys in that league too. But I'm just wondering, like, you have that transition. So now although you're a scorer there, you mean the penalty minutes you were putting up, that was obviously where Florida had you pegged and what you were growing into that role at that point. And so then you moved from junior to the AHL and then to the NHL. So I was just wondering for you, like, junior tough, AHL tough, NHL tough. Like, was there a level up process in every one of those scenarios for you?
To a degree, because obviously you're going from, teenagers to young men to full adults. So yes, there is a transition. But to me, it really wasn't. I don't know how to explain. I don't know how to explain it because I don't want to sound delusional or more delusional than normal or cocky, right? Like it was never like, once I figured out what I could do and what I couldn't do, there was never really any fear, right? And I knew that I was like, no one could really get to me, right? So was I known as the big man on campus in junior? Not my first 2 years. There was this dude, George Larac.
Yeah, we know him.
Yeah. So we had God knows how many fights in junior, which which was a battleground. And yeah, during that time we had a lot of tough guys, right? Like in that league, in the Q, it was either you were a goal scorer or a fighter, right? So there wasn't much in between. And it was a murderer's row, like almost every game you play. And, you were talking about the 490 penalty minutes. I think I had that with about 10 games left. And I remember telling guys, like, I'm not taking another penalty because if I get over 500, everybody's going to think I'm a goon. So I'm staying away from that. But, no, I mean, like that last year, George had graduated up to the AHL. Yeah, certainly by my last year, like, I was that guy. When I walked into the AHL, I felt I was that guy. I went into camp. When I fought some guys in camp, I felt confident, like I beat them. And when in exhibition games, I beat them. And when I got to the AHL, like I just didn't feel like anyone could beat me. Again, some of that was the delusion that you have to have in that role. But some of it was based off the fact that I knew that I obviously have really long arms, but I also really fast hands, and I grew up as much as a hockey fan, I grew up as a boxing fan, right? And, I like the heavyweights, obviously that's great, but my favorite fighters were Pernell Whitaker, the Roy Jones Juniors of the world, guys who understood, like, I don't have to take a punch if I don't have to, like, to punch you. Like, I can be smarter about this. Like, it's prize fight. Mm-hmm. So I that's kind of the approach I took my fighting. Like, I can go to toe to toe if you want me to, but why take one if I can, I can let you throw 5 punches that are gonna miss me to be able to throw that one that's gonna stop you. Right. And that's kind of was always my philosophy. So like, I was never worried. Like I hear this, I hear guys' stories and the anxiety a lot of guys had, or that wasn't me. That just wasn't me. That wasn't my experience. Like I didn't really spend much time thinking about it. Like, and honestly, like my thought process every night, the things that would keep me awake at night was, how the hell am I going to stay in front of Gonchar so that I'm not going to be a -3. I was always thinking about how I can find ways to get more minutes, to show that I could play. You know, like I wanted to be Cam Neely. You know, like I wanted to have that opportunity to go from, you know, one role to the next. I wanted to be Todd Bertuzzi, you know, who you know, struggled his first couple of years and found that gear to go to the next level. You know, that was the only thing in my mind.
That's awesome.
Fighting was just kind of, for me, was just kind of the thing that I knew got my foot in the door. But I think I did it too well. so it kind of pigeonholed me into that,
right.
you know, into that
right.
role. You know, and you know, I don't regret it. You know, obviously, you know, it got me to, you know, play, you know, as long as I did.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I don't, you know, I was never one of those guys that hated the role. Like I know guys who were in that role hated.
Right.
That wasn't me.
Did you enjoy it? Like, did you like the fights?
Not as much as Paul Laws did. Paul Laws loved the fight, which was a little scary. But I didn't care either way. Like, honestly, like if I went through a game and nobody asked me to fight, great. If I went through a game and 4 or 5 guys asked me to fight, okay. It is what it is there. Again, I think that's part of why I was fairly successful with it, was that it wasn't all that consumed me. Like I thought of myself more as a forechecker. That's what I cared about. Like I wanted that puck in your corner, and you go back for that puck and know that there's a runaway train coming. Like I wanted to scare you from going back to that puck for the next time. Yeah. That, again, those were more of the things that were in my mind. Like, how am I gonna play well defensively? How do I win the battles on the boards that, you know, if I'm 5 feet from that blue line, that puck's getting out every single time. Like, there's no excuse, right? Like, those were the things that I cared about. Like, fighting was, I was fortunate that I could be good at it, but it was just a part of the game.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. I love hearing about like your personal idea of what role you wanted to grow into too. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that you weren't a great skater, and I'll tell a funny story, and hopefully you don't get mad at me, but I
might. But I'm too far. My arms are long and not long enough to get to you over there. So,
but it was in Florida, when we were in Florida together, and they brought in that power skating instructor, and I can't remember who it was, and we were doing. At the time, it was even pretty cutting edge stuff. I mean, like like a lot of edge work stuff and single leg stuff. And anyways, I remember you like wanting so badly to get better and really honestly struggling with what was being asked out there, you know, and we'd be at one end and you'd be in the neutral zone still trying to get down. Right. And it was, I've actually used that story before, like with younger kids, because it's like the ability to do that and to dig in, you know, and even amongst your peers, right, at the pro level, to be like, yeah, I'm not good at this right now, but I am willing to get back up, and I'm willing to do this, and I'm willing to try and improve. Like, I thought that said a lot about you at the time, and as a person and as a player. So I don't know if you remember that, but you know, you were digging in, man. Like, you were trying to improve what you thought was your weakness, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I mean, from the day that I got to Hull, and it became a realization that what I was doing growing up wasn't good enough. And especially once I started getting a taste of what those next levels were, and that I possibly could get there, like, it was the only thing that consumed me, right? And you know, I guess I'm fortunate enough with the parents that I had. Like, hard work was never anything that was. It was just what was expected of you, right? Like, if you can't figure it out, just keep working at it. Like, eventually you will, right? And again, I was never going to end up being a pretty skater. Like, nobody was ever going to confuse me for like Pavel or, you know, Brett Hedican or anything like that. But I knew that I can get myself to a point where, you know, my speed could be better, that I could be more agile, you know, and it was just going to take work. You know, it was going to take transforming you know, my body and being able to get those deep leg bends and knee bends and getting my butt down and keeping the chin up. And you know, it was fun to be in the process, right? Like, like, I took that as was hard work. It was sweaty, whatever, but I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it for not only for the personal reasons, but I enjoyed it because I felt that it would make me better for my teammates, you know, and that was really important. So, and again, having teammates that were supportive, as opposed to like, oh Jesus, what's that guy? You know, like
Right.
It made a world of difference. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think they had a good group there, and I think they experienced success early there, kind of right on the cusp of when we were coming in there. I remember being a black ace there in that cup run, and that like I said, I mean, not that they won, but they won enough there to grow and to go through some of those adversities. And I mean, we weren't a part of that on the ice and the battles, but you're still, the organization itself develops.
It's osmosis, yeah. Like
exactly.
The guys that they had at the top were so instrumental, I think, to a lot of us, because it showed us what it took to not necessarily be the best player, but a player that's wanted.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to really learn those lessons, like you had an opportunity, and they were so welcoming in that aspect, right? There weren't many guys who were like, "Hey kid, I don't want to help you. You're going to take my job." Like, there's few, but not many, and especially compared to other teams or other organizations, right? So, from day one, Lazar was like my big brother. Like he trying to help me from day one, from the jump. Gordon Murphy, Jeff Smith, Tommy Fitz, some of the older guys, and even the younger guys that had success early on, like Billy and Needs and Eddie Joe. Again, they were Rhett Warner. Like they were some really cool dudes that were really helpful. I remember having surgery in my hand in the middle of summer and being in Florida by myself, and Jovo just like coming to my hotel and was like, just pack up, you're staying with me for the next 2 weeks. It was like, okay. I mean, awesome. I appreciate it. There was a lot of guys there that understood, because most of those guys were never superstars, right? They were never in the position to be, big name players in their original places. This was their last spot. This was their last chance to be an NHLer, and they appreciated it. And conversely, not only on the ice, but how they acted off the ice, how they built a fan base in the area, how they, shook every kid's hand. Were willing to sign those autographs, even those days when it was super hot and they just wanted to get home. They did a lot to create an atmosphere for us to build off of. And unfortunately, we haven't won enough games since then to continue a lot of it. But, the crew that we have here is starting to get in that right direction. And we got a second chance at these playoffs, and hopefully they can make a run with it.
Yeah, no doubt. What about any high points? Like, how about that first? Who was your first NHL fight, and what was the first NHL goal like? Let's go over those ones.
First NHL fight, funny enough, was Craig Berube. It was a exhibition game in Halifax, my first exhibition game, and he just asked me to go, and I was like, at that time I was 18, 19. I was a little scared. I was like, I've seen this guy on TV for many years, just killing guys. And it went well. Like, I did really well. Like hit him a lot more than he hit me. So I felt pretty good about it. My first goal was, it's a story I love telling, actually. I'd been sent down my second year for what was supposed to be a week and ended up being 2 months. and I was starting to get a little pessimistic, I guess, a little bit, but I got a phone call one day in the early morning, and like, Pete, you and Chris Wells, you got called up, but you're not going to play tonight. There's a couple of injuries, whatever. So, but they need you up there to be a body. So, all right, cool. So we got on the plane from New Haven to Florida, and it was a full flight, so we couldn't even get comfortable. We couldn't. I couldn't sleep on the plane. There was no real food. We landed late.
Wellesley wasn't a small man either.
No, Wellesley. No, we were both 6'7" and dumb. Like, it was. Because we're dumb because instead of like getting our own aisle, we decided to sit beside each other, which was just we weren't thinking. Right. But again, we weren't supposed to play, so we got there. We got there to the rink late. Like once we landed late, you know how South Florida traffic was back then, going up 595. Like it was just stalled. So by the time we got to the rink, they just got off the ice for warm up, and we walk in, we have our bags, about to put it in, and Scott Tinkler's like, Pete, you gotta get dressed. You're playing. Like, what? Yeah, you got to get on the ice. So I threw my gear on and, kind of in a whirlwind. Literally, I was sleep deprived. I had no clue what was going on. And first shift, I was against St. Louis. Billy Lindsay gave me a draw pass, and I roofed it on Richie Perrin, who's from my hometown. So like we skated every summer together, and like
that's funny. He was a goalie for me in Spokane for one.
Oh, was he? There you go. But when I put it on, I was like, no big deal. Like I've done this every summer. Like what's the big deal? So like I didn't really celebrate. But came back to the bench. Boys were going crazy, like loving it. Everybody was happy. Started feeling my oats a little bit. Like, I'm an NHLer now. I got my goal. And we went out for the next shift, and we're lining up at center ice, and all I heard was, "Hey kid, we're going." And I looked over, it was Tony Twist, and it was the only time it's probably ever happened in my life where my knees were shaking. I was like, I do not want this. But puck dropped, and I grabbed him, and I think I hit him about like 3 or 4, like real quick. And then it was the best seatbelt I think you'd ever see in the history of the game. Like he was throwing every punch he possibly could, and my arms were up. Nope, sorry. And he was just like for about 40 seconds just trying to get anything to get on me, and I was like, no, sorry, Bob. And again, it was the only time that's ever happened in my career. He literally just like with a wrist just kind of like flicked, and my whole body crumbled. I'm on my knees looking up at him like, oh man, it was a great 21 years. I really enjoyed my time on this planet. And he held back, and I was like, oh, thank God. And we were in the penalty box, and I'm just trying to trying to catch my breath, trying to figure out what's going on, and all I heard was, "Hey kid." I was like, oh fuck, like not again. Like, so I look over, I'm like, "Hey sir, great job. You got some long arms." I'm like, "Yep." I straight go gadgeted. Like there was no way. Yeah. No, I literally was just trying to survive. And I remember like he was doing radio in St. Louis one year, and he interviewed me. He was like, "Kid, you're the only guy that beat me in about like 5 years." I was like, I literally did not think I beat you. I was just literally trying to make it to the next day. I had no clue what was going on. But thank you very much. I'm going to put that on my tombstone.
No doubt. That's pretty cool. Yeah, because he was definitely recognized as one of, if not the toughest for like a while there, right?
Oh, he was a killer. Yeah. No, I mean, like I tell you, like Paul Laws loved the fight, and Paul was tough as nails. And I remember stories he was telling me about when he fought Twister in the minors, and literally, I think he said twice Twister hit him on the top of the head and cracked his helmet. I was like, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like a whole different level.
A whole lot of stuff I don't want. Yeah. Who did, just with the fighting, because I mean, there's some fans that listen to this definitely as well, and it's not just the young kids and the parents. Like what, who is someone that you like really enjoyed or always seemed to get the better of, or who is someone that always, gave you a little bit of a hard time that you remember?
Who gave me a hard time for whatever reason, and I shouldn't say that because he was really tough, but was Wade Belak. Like for whatever reason, like I just couldn't get over on him, and at best I think I made a draw to him like on those couple times. And what really frustrated me was because I was always trying to get to Domi, and Domi would just hide behind him every single time, and then having to fight him, and I was like, damn it. But no, Wade was really tough, and I struggled with him. I mean, obviously in the junior years, Big George, George was tough, man.
Yeah.
Like I learned to be friends with him, so he was never mad at me, but
Right.
he was certainly tough. One of the guys that had a lot of fun fighting, which is kind of sadistic, I guess, when you say it that way. But I liked fighting Barnaby. Like the couple times when he asked me to fight, it felt like Christmas Day. I was like, really? You want this? But he was tough, and I played with him in Colorado. He was a great teammate.
But he's only like, he was like 6-footer, right? Or 5'10", or 5'11", or how tall?
He was like just under 6. And again, he was a guy that, like when he was in the queue, I think he led the league in scoring one year with like 350 penalty minutes. Like he's
a player.
He was a good player. He was really tough, but like he just wasn't in my class. Like we were just two different animals. But he was just such an agitator, right? So like the fact that there were so many times I wanted him that he would just like, nah, we're not doing this, man. We'll do it on my terms. So when he finally said, let's do it, I was like I had to pause to actually drop my gloves. I'm like, are we really doing, like,
right?
If you drop your gloves and punch me, like, I know we're fighting. And when he did that, like, it was like, oh man, like, you don't know the whooping you're about to take right now. Like, this is going to be bad. In fact, when the day he got traded to Colorado, we were in Edmonton, and we went down to lunch, and I see him, and he comes up, hey, Big Pete, it's good to finally be on your team, but you owe me about $50,000. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, you beat me up so bad one time in Florida that when I was walking off, an old man started yelling at me, and I punched him, and I got suspended and fined $50,000. It's like, well, try to collect. Good luck.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yo, how did that? I mean, the one year you led the league by like 100 PIMs. Like, was that? I don't know. Would that be something you set out to do? I mean, I would assume not. But is that just the way that it worked out?
Mike Keenan. I'll just say Mike Keenan.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, honestly, it was the last thing I wanted that year. I got in a fight in November, and I landed on my elbow, and I tore my rotator cuff and fractured my collarbone. And I didn't know, like, I just thought it was like kind of a wrinkle in it.
Right.
In my right arm, the arm I threw with, and it hurt every day. So for some reason, when Mike came in, like, that was, Pete, I need you to fight every night. We got a bunch of guys that can't stand up for themselves, so we need you to really stand up. And kind of that's ended up what happening. And at the end of the year, we did our physical, and they're like, yeah, you have a really bad rotator cuff. I don't know what you were doing. Keep playing. I was like, I don't know either. That was really dumb. Really dumb.
Right.
But again,
how was it playing for him? I mean, there's been some horror stories. He was I don't know where he was at in his career at that point. A little bit farther into it, I think. Did he mellow out a little bit, or was he still pretty hot?
It was still pretty hot. Pretty hot. I actually I was fine with him. I got along with him pretty good. He was really tough on really young guys, and that was really frustrating, because we had some really young players who needed some room to grow, and he was really, really tough on them. But Mike was that guy that he was always going to be on you and challenge you, and if you just took it, he would just keep going. So right. you had to stand up for yourself in private, not in front of guys, but you had to bring him in his office, talk to him in his office, and say, that's not happening. The things that you're saying or doing, they're ending right now. And once you did that, he left you alone. And if it wasn't something you could handle, and you said you wanted to be traded, he wasn't going to try to screw you over. He just traded you. Danny Boyle was a perfect example of it. Danny Boyle should have played a lot more for us. He'd play one game, get 3 or 4 points on the power play for us. He'd make one mistake the next game, and he'd be in the stands for 3 games, right?
Right.
And he asked to be traded, and Mike didn't do anything to try to screw him over. He traded him to a good young up and coming team, and really helped his career in that aspect, right? Ryan Johnson was another guy that asked to be traded, and again, he didn't try to play games with him. He just said, if you can't be here, let me go put you in another NHL team. So
that's respectful. I mean, Brian McCabe said the same thing in the interview I had with him. He had him in Vancouver, and he said he came at him really hard at the start, and he said we had our FU match, and he said he kind of left me alone after that. So that was, I guess, his way to vet guys in his own way.
Mike had it was like a 3-game rule, right? So 3 games in, like, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then your 4th game you're screwed. Like we made a trade for Matty Cullen, and Matty Cullen showed up, and Mark Parrish was like one of his best friends from growing up, and Mark was my roommate for a couple of years, and so he gravitated me right away. So we played that first game, and we're riding the bike after the game, and he was like, Pete, I was a little scared about Keynes, but like I think all the rumors weren't true. Like he's pretty cool. He's like a pretty good guy. Game 1, we got 2 to go. All right. So we play the second game. Same thing. He's like, Pete, man, come on, stop it. Like he's awesome. He keeps telling me how great I am. Game 2, you got 1 more. Plays the 3rd game. He's like, man, like Pete, like stop it. Like Mike's awesome. Okay. We'll see you next game. And very first shift next game, he's taking a neutral zone face-off, and loses it. He loses the face-off, but it like literally comes in our bench right off the bat, and all you hear is, "Geez, this is the National Hockey League. So get him off the ice. Teach him how to take face-offs." And he tore a hole into him for the next 3 minutes. Right, just ripped him. Didn't see the ice again. So we're riding the bike after the game, and he's all quiet, and trying to leave him alone for a little bit. Eventually, I look over. I'm like, "Hey, Coles, hey, what's going on? Game 4, how did that go?" You're right, kid. You're right, Pete. You're right. Sorry. Yeah, it was.
So you saw it enough times, and that was just sort of recognized throughout that this. It
was a pattern. Yeah, it was a pattern. Yeah, it's kind of.
I wonder if he recognized the pattern. Do you think he recognized it, or do you think it was actually planned?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I haven't really given that much thought. Like, he was either a genius in that way, or he was just pathological. I'm not sure.
Right.
But again, like for me, like there was no coach that could really tear me down that way, because like I was hard on myself already. Like, so it didn't really matter. Like, when he tried it on me, it was like, hey, look, we could settle this. I mean, it's be okay.
Right.
And he left me alone after that. But yeah, I mean, Mike could be really tough. He could be really tough. He could be really exacting. But the same token, if he did buy into you, you were great.
Right.
Same token, if you were the number 1 guy on his team, oh my God, you were golden. If you were number 2, if you were the number 2 guy, whew, get yourself traded.
Really? Yeah.
Every mistake the first guy would make, it would be on the second guy. Absolutely. It was tough.
That's wild. Well, I promised you an hour and a half, and I told you too. This is the way it goes, man. We could go for another 2 hours. I'd love to chat, but just want to give you credit, man. 391 games in the best league in the world, 19 goals, 18 more than me, and 1,500 penalty minutes, man. That's unbelievable career. We didn't even get into Colorado, the trade. I want to talk about that. We didn't get into what you're doing now with the Panthers and helping the youth there, grow and develop the programs there. So we'll have to make this part 1, and we'd love to chat with you again. But Pete, thanks so much, man. You're a great guest. Thanks for being there today.
Appreciate it, man. I loved it. It was great, and we absolutely have to do this again.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today, and thank you for listening. That was really good stuff with Peter, and as usual, we always run out of time, so we're going to have to give him back for round 2 here at some point, and get into some of the really good stories that he has, and we covered a couple of them off air, unfortunately, just his some of the great fight stories that he has, and some of those funny scenarios that happened in the game. We were pretty serious in this episode, and I think we needed to be, because it's a time that calls for some seriousness and some sobriety when it comes to what is going on in society at large, and how that impacts this game of hockey that we all love. So we'll have to have him back on. Pete's super eloquent, very intelligent, and is doing a lot of great things there with the Florida Junior Panthers, and trying to get minor hockey rolling there, and being a role model and inspiration to Florida's youth there, and that's something that I definitely wanted to cover, and we'll have to do that again next time. So thanks again for listening. Please, if you haven't already, check out upmyhockey.com. That's where you can find out more about me and what I do, and also my Facebook group for parents, Up My Hockey parent group on Facebook, where we do get to ask questions to my podcast guests, where we go over mindset trainings. We talk about industry experts to help us all and your players navigate the space called hockey. So I'm really proud of both those scenarios. If you want to find out more, please go there. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.